I'm the global lead for migration and displacement. And I'm delighted to be able to moderate today's side event. We are here to discuss a topic that has already received quite a bit of attention in the last few days during the discussions of the International Migration Review Forum. And the topic is nothing other than ending child immigration detention of children. So I want to welcome you all to the side event entitled Working to End Child Immigration Detention Through Peer Learning. But I don't want to take much more time. A few quick housekeeping rules from my side to make sure you're all comfortable. So first and foremost, feel welcome in our virtual room. We wish that next time we can be all together again, but it is already great to have many of us join. I see colleagues are joining in remotely. We have a few colleagues here with us in the room. Make yourself comfortable in the virtual room. And also importantly, if you would like to listen to the discussion in Spanish, we have a translation option for you. So at the bottom of the screen, there's a little globe that says interpretation, and there you can choose Spanish if that is a language you would prefer, and listen to the simultaneous translation. We also have an option to be receiving your questions and for you to be choosing which questions you would like to really be addressed, time allowing. And that is you using the Q&A function. This is where you can enter questions and where others can read what others have asked and indicate if they would like this question to be bumped up the list. So it's almost like thumbs up, thumbs down, or this is really interesting, or I would really like to know. So there's an option if you go to the Q&A for you to not just depose, put in a question, but also for you to indicate which questions others have put in that you would like to vote to move up the list. And then also I want to just flag very briefly that we have a few video messages for you. We have a series of excellent speakers who will reflect on different aspects of what it takes to end child immigration detention, what is the role and power of peer learning, what governments have already been doing and are doing, and what support they would like to see. But then also we are trying, if our speakers are disciplined with their time, we will have an opportunity to also open up for questions. So with this, I would like to, again, warmly welcome you all. Remind you, if you would like to listen to Spanish, there is a translation option for you. And introduce our first speaker and co-host from the government of Thailand, His Excellency Mrs. Supatra Srimai Tripitak, who is Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Thailand in Geneva. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon to colleagues in Geneva. Good morning to colleagues in New York. Sawasdee ka. It is my honor to deliver an opening remarks for a side event.
Just a second, we cannot hear the message at the moment.
Detention through here.
One moment.
Who is doing the message? Just 1 second, please bear with us. We're trying to figure out the sound to make sure we can all hear Ambassador Srimai Tripitak. Where's Terry?
People on the call can hear.
Oh, people on the call can hear. Okay.
Perhaps I need to switch to original audio.
Okay, then it's fine. We will, Laura, why don't you then proceed? Thank you.
Good afternoon to colleagues in Geneva. Good morning to colleagues in New York. Sawasdee ka. It is my honor to deliver an opening remarks for a side event working to end child immigration detention through peer learning, held at the margins of the International Migration Review Forum. I wish to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to our co-organizer, the Working Group on Alternative to Detention under the UN Network on Migration, for their hard work and excellent coordination. My thanks also go to our co-sponsors, the government of Colombia, and the government of Portugal. Please allow me to share with you a few points. First, I would like to reiterate our objective for this side event. It should be an opportunity for states that have and have not yet put in place alternatives to detention for children to share their experiences. It is also a chance where states can learn about existing guidance and available support from relevant stakeholders, such as UN agencies and civil society's partners. Second, we have distinguished panelists with us today, ranging from to a migrant being detained as a child. They will surely provide diverse view on the matter, underlining the society approach. Third, on our part, Thailand is committed to upholding the rights of the child. We support the practice of non-detention of children in immigration detention centers, giving consideration to the best interests of the child. This policy is pursued by the whole of government approach, from leaders to frontline officers. Thailand has undertaken a number of initiatives to promote alternative to detention for children at all levels. Some examples of these initiatives will be provided by our distinguished representative from the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security in the next sessions. I wish to highlight here one particular example of initiative, which is a peer learning exchange. Thailand has always been open to take part in this exercise. We believe that it is an invaluable practice in which states can openly discuss progress and challenges. The goal is to seek the most suitable way to apply alternatives to detention for our own countries. Last but not least, I am delighted to inform you that the Thai cabinet just approved Thailand's pledge to effectively implement alternative to detention measures for migrant children. In line with Objective 13 of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration, the pledge underscores our commitment to further our work on alternative to detention beyond what has been discussed at the International Migration Review Forum. In closing, we hope that our discussion today will be of added value to the existing community of practice on using alternative to detention. We hope that as a community, we can maintain the momentum towards ending child migration detention. I wish you all a fruitful meeting. Thank you and khop kun ka.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your words and for being our co-host here today. We have had such an intense journey of intense and good cooperation with the government of Thailand over the past few years, starting with the discussions that led to the commitments in Objective 13 in the Global Migration Compact, where I recall many late nights over at the UN building, negotiating, discussing, exploring with governments, and finding ways of how do we move forward? How do we anchor the commitment and the aspiration that we need to end the practice of child immigration detention and make sure that we have that strong commitment in the Global Migration Compact. And here we are now, 4 years later, at the first International Migration Review Forum. And it is such a pleasure to have traveled the journey together with our government partners in Thailand, in the country, in Geneva, here in New York. And equally, I'm looking around and looking at our colleagues and other co-hosts from Portugal, another big and strong champion on the issue of child immigration detention. I just want to acknowledge at this point that It is exactly as we just heard. It is about government to government exchanges. It is about learning from each other, not being afraid to share also the challenges, because it is not an easy journey to travel, to phase out a practice, and also to really do this in the spirit of openness and trust, and being able to also ask difficult questions. So with this, I would like to now show you one more video and introduce very briefly the background to that next video message, which has been the work of the UN Migration Network working group on ending child immigration detention, on alternatives to detention, that has been co-led by UNICEF, our partners from the International Detention Coalition, and UNHCR. And together with these partners and together with the network, we wanted to capture in a very short video message what this is all about, what motivates us, and what is the direction of travel on our road to ending child immigration detention. So please stay with us for a moment to listen to this next video.
Children migrate for various reasons, including reuniting with family and leaving precarious situations in search of a better life. Some of them travel with their families, while others may migrate on their own or separated from their families during the journey. Every day in over 100 countries, migrant children are detained, whether alone or with their families, because of their migration status. Many governments use immigration detention under the false assumption that it deters irregular migration. Others resort to detention merely due to lack of capacity of national child protection and alternative care systems. Regardless of the reason, immigration detention causes great damage to children, depriving them of their fundamental rights in childhood. This often has irreversible effects on a child's health and well-being, also impacting their families and societies where they live.
We were asked to take everything off, all our clothes off, so that they can check what you have. If you have money, if you have phone, everything you have, they will take away. Every block, and there's around 40 to 45 people staying. Everyone, there's no matter, there's no privacy. There's no consideration of your age. Someone in age of 16 kept sleeping next to someone that's age of 60. Going out for 5 minutes was a dream. Myself and many others in detention, we were dreaming and waiting for that day so that we can go outside of the IDC for 5 minutes.
With COVID-19, exposure to the unsanitary and overcrowded conditions of detention increases the impact on migrant children, putting them at higher risk of infections. Under international law, states are obliged to consider the best interests of the child in all decisions affecting them. States should provide migrant children with adequate care and reception, maintaining family unity. With the adoption of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, governments recognized the need to protect migrant children and agreed to work to end child immigration detention by ensuring the availability and accessibility of non-custodial alternatives. While some governments do not resort to child immigration detention at all, others have succeeded in ending the practice or taken important steps in this direction. However, much more needs to be done. The UN Network on Migration urges states to prohibit immigration detention for children, release all migrant children and families who are currently detained, refer unaccompanied children to appropriate alternative care and families to non-custodial community-based alternatives, include migrant children and strengthen national child protection and welfare systems. Redirect some resources currently expended on immigration detention for the development and implementation of alternative care and reception arrangements for migrant children and families. Strengthen international cooperation and exchange between member states with the support of stakeholders. Immigration detention is never in the best interests of a child. Together, we can end it.
Thank you very much. I hope that everyone has taken good notes of these very specific next steps that are needed on the road to ending child immigration detention, strengthening the child protection system, ensuring access to key services, but also most importantly, working with and listening and learning from those who have lived experiences of what detention feels like and what it means and how the experience stays with you. But before we get there, I would like all of you online, all of you here in the room, and all of our speakers just to take a brief moment. Just imagine and recall what it felt like when you were a child yourself. and remember and maybe retrieve a moment in your childhood that for you sort of is the symbol or the moment of this is when you felt happy and what that felt like. I myself, for example, when I'm thinking of a moment that sort of for me is just feeling like childhood and happiness, was coming home on Saturday from school, which was then the end of the week, and knowing that there would be spaghetti bolognese at home, my favorite dish at the time, and we would only have it on Saturday at lunch. So for me, that smell of spaghetti bolognese on Saturday meant end of the school week, beginning of the weekend, and just something to eat that I just loved. So hold your memories of your own childhood, of those moments, those smells, those feelings of safety, of protection, of happiness. And I would like to now introduce Haya Dakbari, who is here with us connecting from Australia. So Haya, I don't know exactly what time it is for you now, but it's probably at some unseen hour late at night or early in the morning. So really, really big thanks for you to be here. You are a campaigner, you're an advocate, you are a force on your own, trying to change the way people remember, think, and of course, design policies and programs so that your own experience does not get repeated for others. Haya, the floor is yours. And I would also like, if you don't mind, maybe just because you are now the first, would you like to share with us what your childhood memory is that for you brings back those feelings of happiness and safety? Haya, over to you.
Thanks, Verena. It's around 11:30 p.m. Near to midnight, but good to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Where are we dialing to this meeting? And it's I'm privileged to be in this room, talking with you all. And thanks for having me again. I think for me, that brief moment of reflection takes me back to my childhood. I mean, there could be many memories, but one thing that I can recall at the moment is when every time I was going to morning time when I was going to school, before school, my mom was making a breakfast and taking me to school, and taking me to school, leave me and come back. But that time was. That memory was taken away from me when I was detained for 1 year in a detention center. All those memories, all those childhoods fade away in just a blink of eye. I was detained for a year, and I was put in detention regardless of your age. And regardless of where you're coming from, and regardless of what situation you're coming from, and which also in a situation that they do not allow you to go to have a basic human rights, which is education, which is a very basic human rights, which is the right of freedom, the very basic human rights, the right to go for a walk, and that never happen to me, or didn't happen to me after 1 year when I got out of the detention center. And that 1 year had a severe impact on my mental and psychological health. When I was resettled, and I was one of the luckiest people from that cohort to be resettled in Australia 7 years ago. And after arriving in Australia, all these memories, all those the impact, the psychological impact that the detention had on me, had a very severe impact on me when I started, for example, university. I had to go to the psychologist for 1 year in order to be able to study, because every time I was going Even I really now after a few years, I think I get better. But for the first year when I arrived in Australia, that I couldn't go to sea and I couldn't go read all those immigration, all those stories about offshore detention center, because every time I read, every time I see those situations, it takes me back to where I was. So from that story, from that brief memory of mine, that can give you an overview of the impact of detention on children. And when I was detained when I was 17. So people are still, and young people are still being detained in a very younger age. So I think there are alternatives to detention, and also and there are good examples. And the good examples, people representatives sitting in the room who have taken the lead. Colombia is the one who have taken the lead of ending child detention, and also there are more countries in the room who have done. And I encourage our other states also or other countries to take alternatives to detention, and also by working with leaders, by working with people with experience, by leadership of young people, not just tokenistic, not just saying, rather taking them with themselves, and also because they are the solution. They have the solution to cooperate and work with NGOs and also government representatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayat. Thank you, Hayat, for also acknowledging and flagging to us the important work and the example of countries like Colombia. We will hear from them in a moment. Colombia has been another very strong champion working with partners in really putting a spotlight on how states can completely manage without even detaining children, and in this way also help and support other countries on the road. But Hayat, I thank you for your reflections. I do want to come back to you. There may be questions in the chat to you, so please also see what is coming up there. But now I would like to now turn to our next speaker, and that is Ms. Krisavarna Vara-Misra, who is Social Development Officer in the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security in Thailand. The floor is yours, and I would just like to remind all our speakers to keep your interventions to the short time allocated so that we can open up for questions. And I will be using the raise hand function. So when you see a yellow hand flashing, that is when your time is up, so that everyone can keep track of time and we can come back to you with questions. The floor is yours. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hello everyone. On behalf of the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security of Thailand, I would like to thank you to the co-organize and co-sponsor countries for organizing this important event in support of ending child immigration detention. Thailand has committed to upholding the rights of the child, following our Prime Minister pledge at the Leader Summit on the Global Refugee Crisis in 2016 to end the immigration detention of children. We have developed and implemented the MOU ATD signed by 7 government agencies in 2019. We also developed the SOP to guide the implementation of the MOU ATD in 2020. The MOU and its SOP have been instrumental in reducing the number of children in immigration detention centers. More than 300 children and their families have been released from immigration detention and receive assistance and social support in the community, as well as government shelters. Strong collaboration between government, UN agency, and civil society have ensured that children and parents remain together and receive adequate care and protection, as well as support on their resolution. Since the ATD policy was introduced in Thailand 3 years ago, we have learned that ATD is a better public policy choice. It not only serves the child's best interest, but can be beneficial for the country when migrant children and families are allowed to enter to child protection system with case management support to make better decisions about their migration journey. At the societal level, healthy and self-sustained migrants in the community can stimulate cultural exchange and contribute to the country's socio-economic development. However, some challenges remain. First, the lack of awareness on the ATD and SOP among agencies at local levels, as well as insufficient capacity to implement it. Second, long-term care may need, and for refugees, third country resettlements is very limited. Third, COVID-19 has caused delay in the assistance process. To overcome these challenges, here are a few local resolutions that will facilitate Thailand to reach our GCM commitments, particularly as a GCM champion country, and to ensure that ATD for children will be implemented effectively. First, we need to properly review the implementation of this MOU. Therefore, Thailand, in collaboration with UNICEF and IDC, has developed a monitoring, evaluation, and learning framework for the implementation of MOU ATD. The objective of the MAIL framework is to enable us to measure and assess our progress in implementing the MOU ATD and to produce evidence and lessons learned to support strategic thinking, evidence-based decision-making, and ensuring transparency and accountability of key stakeholders. Through the MAIL framework, we have set the ultimate goal that children and families in migration are not detained, and detention is only carried out as a last resort. Second, we also need to continuously strengthen the capacity of social workers and law enforcement officers to protect children affected by migration and to implement the MOU in collaboration with UNICEF, UNHCR, and IOM country office. We have already taken capacity building activities this year. As a result, 121 government officials have a better understanding of the MOU ATD. And also, Thailand has advanced in GCM commitment by facilitating the development of policy related to children affected by migration, applying a whole of society approach, as well as facilitating life experience leadership in policy development. Early this year, DCY, IDC, Tadersom Germany, and UNICEF Thailand co-organized the children and youth affected by migration-led advocacy workshop and consultation. Throughout this initiative, we have empowered 175 children and youth affected by migration to share their experiences and recommendations directly to policymakers, to support the development of the National Plan of Action to fulfill the rights of children affected by migration and NTD to be included.
Just a small heads up, we are almost to the end of your time.
Okay, there are key lessons learned from this initiative. You can visit our website that we will post in the chat box. Okay. We believe that political will, commitments to the best interest of the child, and multi-stakeholder collaboration have been the key drivers for our achievements. These practical experiences are our promising practices that will support Thailand to successfully end children immigration detention. By sharing our experiences today, we hope that it will encourage our friends in the other part of the world to join us to end child immigration detention and improve the situation of children affected by migration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Varamisra. Thank you for sharing also the journey. I remember back in the days, you mentioned 2016, it started with a pledge. It continued with an MOU that became an SOP. And as you then described, that turned into trainings of social workers, youth consultations, Thailand taking on a key leadership role on peer learning, peer exchanges. And here we are now, 6 years later from your pledge and listening to you on the progress, more than 300 children who are no longer in detention, a policy shift, and what you described, and I found that particularly striking, that actually detention isn't just better for children, it is actually a better public policy choice. So it is better for the government as well, in terms of public policies, in terms of outcomes. So I think this is a really inspiring road that you laid out here. And maybe an encouragement for other governments, other partners who are listening, that it can all start with a pledge. And this is a moment maybe here with the International Migration Review Forum to make a pledge that will take you down the road, as you described, where children are no longer in detention and public policy has improved. But with this, I would like to turn and take you to another part of the world and introduce our next speaker, Ms. Guadalupe Arbelayes, who is the head of the Legal Affairs Department in Migración, Colombia. And Colombia, as I mentioned before, we have also had the pleasure to have your ambassador here with us yesterday here at UNICEF House, where again, he was speaking very publicly and openly and persuasively about the strong commitment of Colombia for children in general, and specifically also on ending and supporting efforts to end child immigration detention. I would like to remind you also, you have 3 minutes and I will start flagging my hands and making funny faces, but I'm very, very pleased to give the floor to you to hear from you and what is Colombia's maybe advice or message to other governments around the world that want to take the same road traveled as we had just heard before.
Gracias. Como es de conocimiento público, desde
As you know, since 2015, Colombia has had a mixed migration flow that has been constant and massive. Approximately 1.8 million Venezuelan migrants, out of which almost 29% correspond to children and adolescents between 0 and 18 years of age. Colombia does not consider detention of children and adolescents. Actually, Colombia considers that they need to be protected. They are subject to special protection without any differences due to their nationality or migration status, and especially if they are unaccompanied by their families. According to the Convention of the Rights of Children, the Inter-American Convention of Human Rights, and the principle of non-discrimination, which is acknowledged in the Code for Children in Colombia, detention of children and adolescents in Colombia is a behavior that has irreparable consequences. So we recognize them regardless of their nationality, and we need to provide them the support, provide them the right space so that they feel protected and so that they feel loved. The Convention on the Rights of Children acknowledges that as part of all of the measures made by the public institutions about children, we will focus on the best interest of children, and this way their rights will prevail. We will impose measurements to prevent risks and so that their rights are not violated. The Colombian state, abiding by international commitments and in order to protect fundamental rights of migrant children and their families, we have developed some strategies. One of them, the first of them, is called First the Children, and it is based on the principle of international protection, and it enabled that as of 2019, we grant Colombian nationality to all of the children of Venezuelan parents that are born as of January 2015. This measure, up to March 31st, has benefited approximately 52,000 children that were born in Colombia that were in risk of being stateless. The national government, as many of you know, adopted through Decree 2016 last year, the temporary protection status for Venezuelan migrants. As part of this mechanism, our objective is to gather data and also to categorize and regularize migrants coming from Venezuela. And as a result, we will make sure that they are integrated into their communities. This mechanism is focused on children and adolescents, and it's based on great relevant principles such as non-discrimination, equality, best interest of children, and family unity, among others, with the purpose of protecting the Venezuelan migrant and especially the children, who we guarantee their best interest throughout all of the different processes and procedures. As a result of this approach, with implementation of the temporary protection, we have implemented innovative measures to guarantee the protection of children by prioritizing the analysis of the data provided to us, by establishing that those that are under 7 years of age do not need to register biometrically, prioritizing those children so that they can go to school and that they remain in the system. And we also prioritize those who finish their studies so that we allow them to continue with their higher studies. Migración Colombia, Migration Colombia, the institution that I represent, and Colombia, the country, has had the support of the UNICEF in order to carry out measures inside of the country in order to guarantee that we provide accompaniment to our children. As a consequence, in the creation of pathways in order to advance in the compliance of objective number 13 of the Global Pact to end detention for migration reasons, it's essential that we work together with the public sector, with the private sector, with the different international cooperation agencies, as well as civil society, considering the positive impact it has to work collaboratively and how this will help us end migration detention. Colombia, committed to human rights, reiterates its willingness to strengthen the efforts worldwide, and it will continue to learn from the experiences of others by working and by sharing our experiences, our good practices as well, in order to protect and to end migration detention in children. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Arbaleas. And I picked out a number of things that I think you really highlighted in your intervention. And I just want to maybe just draw in on them for a moment. I think first, what Colombia has always done, and it's been so impressive, is that you kept on thinking, what is best for children? And how do we actually keep that at the center? These are children first. And everything else is sort of secondary. And then we're thinking about what do these children need? And I think that is such an important, that's just entirely changes your mindset, right? How you actually approach, and then how you look at what policy choices you have as a government and what is best for them, for those children and their families. And I really also, I think linked to this, of course, is the prioritization that you spoke about at the end. What does that mean then in terms of where do I prioritize my resources, my attention, my support? And it is such an important shift in mindset. What do we actually want to achieve? Is the protection of children and their well-being our number one priority? Or are there other priorities that would then mean that I take different public policy choices? And so thank you for that strong reminder. I do want to hear from our next speaker, and sort of mentally all of us joining us online. We are now moving further around the globe to another country that has been a strong voice and a consistent voice on ending child immigration detention. I know Portugal has played a very important role also during the negotiations on the Global Migration Compact. You have been our very strong ally, making sure that the European Union position also is as progressive as it was possible. But more importantly, Portugal, you have been holding the course, and you have been very strongly supporting us in thinking, how do we bring governments around the table? So I would like to introduce Ms. Rosario Farmhouse, who is president of the National Commission for the Promotion of the Rights and the Protection of Children and Young People in the government of Portugal. The floor is yours. Again, a reminder, when I start flagging my hand, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear hosts and fellow speakers, dear participants. Good afternoon, good morning, or good night, good evening, I don't know, whatever you are. I would like to thank for the invitation to speak in this side event organized by Portugal, Colombia, and Thailand. It is a pleasure to share with all of you some of the Portuguese experience on alternative to detention of migrant children. Is a very relevant subject that is key for ensuring children's rights all over the world, namely since the adoption of Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration in 2018. Portugal does not practice detention of migrant children. As a state party to the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, Portugal commits to fully applying its principles and abides by taking the best interests of the child as the primary consideration at all situations and contexts, including in the context of migration. This is in line with the clear statement of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, which affirms that the detention of any child because of their or their parents' migration status is a child rights violation and an action against the principle of the best interests of the child. In Portugal, as in any other countries, children in migration may find themselves in situations that put them in an illegal migration status. In these cases, the Portuguese Immigration and Borders Service provides immediate support to the children in order to guarantee the full protection of their rights while respecting their best interests. Each situation is different and must be analyzed in a case-by-case basis. However, in this side event and given the time available, two main scenarios are addressed. One, when a child is accompanied, and another when the child is not. When the child is accompanied by persons whose migration status is also illegal, the Immigration and Border Services provide all of them accommodation at a temporary reception center at the airport, while the repatriation process is under analysis and eventually takes place. The temporary reception center in Lisbon has been recently refurbished for improvements and provides a special place for families with access to the airport international zone, and it's only for 1 or 2 days whenever there's no flight back. In case of unaccompanied children, pursuant to Article 91 of the Law of the Protection of Children and Young People in Danger, the Immigration and Borders Service articulates directly with the Public Prosecution Service, which then coordinates with the courts in order to ensure the best solution to the protection of the child. The child is not going to a detention center. In between these two scenarios, a wide variety of situations may occur that imply highly tailored responses with very specific requirements and features in order to guarantee the best interests of the child and safeguard all the child's rights at all times. It is important to underline that these solutions are possible to the key role of the excellent communication and articulation carried out by the Immigration and Border Services with all entities that are part of our Portuguese system of the promotion and protection of children and young people. It's key to always finding the best solutions and provide children are always at the core and our work and care, at the core of our work and care. I would like to thank the opportunity to be here sharing our experience, and I would like to invite you to come to Portugal and visit our work and experience. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Farmhouse. This is a very tempting offer, an invitation to Portugal. We would be delighted to take this up, and in particular to, I think, as you said, learn, see, experience what you described, because ending child immigration detention isn't just a decision. We heard from Thailand, it's a pledge, there's a process, there's legal policy frameworks that need to be adjusted, but there are also concrete places that need to be provided where reception and care is being provided that is adequate to the needs of children and that are not detaining children. And I think it's these temporary reception centers, it's the social welfare workers that are retrained, it's the retooling of the system that is so critically important. So thank you for describing the concrete places, policies, and the people that are involved in actually delivering on your commitment. I also would like to just draw on one thing that you I think described very clearly, that the only way forward to provide adequate reception and care to migrant children, children seeking asylum, or others that are in the country is by making sure that child protection authorities, institutions like yourself, work hand in hand with the immigration authorities, that there is a partnership, and that the people with the expertise to protect children are the ones who are actually in charge of children. I think it's that shift, right? That when you have that in place, suddenly everything is possible. Now, I would like to introduce and invite to speak our last speaker of today. That is Ms. Carolina Gotardo. She is Executive Director of the International Detention Coalition, IDC, but also a very strong, close ally. We have been co-leading together with IDC and UNHCR, the UN Migration Network Working Group on Alternatives to Detention. We've traveled through thick and thin, convening and learning and experiencing the insides and the outsides of UN policies, partnerships, peer learning. But it is really now my pleasure to give the floor to you to reflect on what we have learned in the last 4 years and what it is that we need to really do to accelerate progress on ending immigration detention. Carolina, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Verena, and hi, everyone. It is great to see so many of you joining us here today from so many different parts of the world for this side event at the IMRF. And I'm particularly happy to be here today because IDC is launching 2 research and mapping pieces that highlight promising practices and also areas of improvement on ATD implementation, focusing on specific practices since the adoption of the GCM. And the first one is entitled Immigration Detention and Alternatives to Detention in the Asia-Pacific region, and was produced in partnership between IDC, the Regional UN Network on Migration for the Asia-Pacific, and the Global UN Migration Network. And this research maps detention laws, policies and trends and practices in the Asia-Pacific region, and includes a briefing on regional trends highlighting promising practices and in-depth analysis of 19 countries in the region. IDC is also launching our report entitled Gaining Ground, Promising Practices to Reduce and to End Immigration Detention, which is a non-exhaustive global report providing an overview of examples and recent developments on alternatives to detention and highlighting promising practices and encouraging further progress in this area. The aim is to inspire governments and to inspire other stakeholders with the steps that they can take to end child immigration detention and to ultimately move away from the use of immigration detention. And this has an annex with 47 country profiles across regions, analyzing detention trends and developments in law and practice and strengths and challenges. And finally, we are completing a mapping project with UNICEF MENA, focused on an analysis of detention trend and promising practices in the MENA region. And this includes 11 country profiles in MENA that will be published soon. And I'm briefly sharing some of the findings with regards to ending child immigration detention. And for instance, what we can see in all these different reports is that unfortunately detention of children is still prevalent in practice across different regions, but there has been some momentum and some progress towards ending child immigration detention and developing community-based ATD for children and for families. For instance, several countries either do not detain children in practice or have introduced laws or policies to prohibit and restrict the use of detention. And we just heard some very interesting examples here from our co-organizers in Thailand, Colombia, and Portugal. And we're also delighted that Germany has also pledged on this issue at the International Migration Review Forum. We're also seeing increased partnerships between government and civil society and international organizations to develop community-based alternatives to detention in different regions. And there are also interesting peer learning efforts, sharing success, challenges, and lessons, including, for instance, the regional peer learning platform in the Asia Pacific and the global peer learning events that are organized by the Working Group on Alternatives to Detention by the UN Migration Network. In terms of promising practice, the report identifies promising practices in some countries, showing joint work to strengthen child protection systems and alternative care arrangements to ensure that children are integrated into mainstream child protection systems. And this is through different mechanisms. So firstly, introducing legal protections against detention and deportation of children. Secondly, is including children in mainstream child protection system and shifting that responsibility for children from immigration to child protection authorities. Thirdly, is working to improve this best interest determination process. And fourthly, providing pathways and referral mechanisms into alternative care arrangements, including case management and service provision. Finally, including a whole of government and a whole of society approaches, including a range of relevant actors in these child protection efforts. And finally, in addressing gaps, we have seen also through the pieces, to the research pieces, that there are many stakeholders working to address gaps in the provision of alternative care for children. So for instance, by ensuring that the best interest principle is upheld in all decisions impacting children, and building more child-sensitive age assessment procedures, and is ensuring that the right of family life is respected, so children are not separated from their parents and families can be supported through community-based ATD. And finally, moving from an over-reliance on institutional care for unaccompanied children and investing in community-based measures, including foster or kinship care and supported independent living arrangements for all the children. Unfortunately, child immigration detention is still prevalent and much more action needs to be taken promptly to ensure that no child is detained for reasons related to their immigration status. And we hope that these tools are a quite useful resource that inspires decision makers to take action and to build progress in implementing ATD and ending child detention with the view of ultimately ending immigration detention. And thanks Verena, and thanks all.
Thank you so much, Carolina, for sharing these examples and also providing, I think, the resources in the chat. So anyone who's interested to read more and find out more about the examples that you described, please have a look. It's a very good read on your flight back from New York or in between your next meeting. And obviously, we hope that it inspires you into action. I take from your intervention, Carolina, I think it all starts with a commitment, right? The sort of political commitment needs to come first. And that's why, again, it is a choice. It is not an inevitable fact that you need to detain or you need to build up an immigration detention infrastructure. These are public policy choices. So commitment, then child protection system, strengthening that system that is able to carry the load, that is actually able to carry and provide the services, the alternative care, and the case management that is needed in order to not just provide different care options, but also find resolution and find solutions for everyone involved. And then building and investing into a care infrastructure that is built around the needs of children. And these are foster, kinship care, alternative care, independent living arrangements. And in a way, these are really the building blocks. And if I remember what we heard from Thailand, what we heard from Colombia, what we heard from Portugal, it is these blocks, right, that actually make up the alternative system that needs to be built to end the detention of children. We have two more speakers for you today, and I do have to apologize in advance. We are running out of time. And we have probably been overly ambitious. We didn't want to miss out on Haya's contribution. We didn't want to miss out on 3 governments who have been such strong champions. And we also didn't want to miss out on the examples that Carolina provided. We have now a short video message for you from Dr. Najat Mala Mijit, who is the special representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, to remind us all that detention is a violation of children's rights. The floor is yours.
Distinguished participants, it is a pleasure to contribute to this important discussion on ending child immigration detention through peer learning. I commend the governments of Thailand, Portugal, and Colombia, as well as the UN Migration Network Working Group on Alternative to Detention for organizing this timely event. I have the honor to chair the UN Task Force on Children Deprived of Liberty, which decided last year to focus its work on ending child immigration detention through joint advocacy, collecting and sharing promising practices. This decision was informed not just by the urgent need to end this practice, but also by the opportunity created by the International Migration Review Forum to raise awareness regarding this issue and to share promising practices. Ladies and gentlemen, the urgency of protecting migrant children's rights and ending child immigration detention worldwide is greater than ever. More children than ever before are on the move, fleeing poverty, discrimination, social disparities, lack of access to basic needs and opportunities, conflict, natural disaster, violence, and political instability. The COVID-19 pandemic and the increasing humanitarian crisis worldwide have exacerbated the already existing vulnerability of these children, creating specific
challenges for them to access life-saving and essential services and to consider migrating as the only survival solution. They travel alone or with their families within and across countries. Girls and boys, especially those who travel undocumented, unaccompanied, or separated from their families or caregivers, are at high risk at all stages of their journey of exposure to various forms of violence, sexual exploitation, slavery, smuggling, trafficking, and enrollment in criminal gangs. Travel and movement restrictions did not prevent children from undertaking perilous and even deadly journeys. As one migrant child told me, "I know I can die, but I have no other choice. I already die every day." These children experience fear, anxiety, mental health problems, increasing risk of self-harm, and an aggravated sense of hopelessness, with a severe impact on their development and well-being that lasts into adulthood. This results in a high human and economic cost. Ladies and gentlemen, in line with the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, some states have undertaken initiatives to protect children and end child immigration detention. In over 60 countries worldwide, child rights-based measures to prevent and to provide alternatives to child immigration detention are in place. States are already showing that it's possible through adopting and implementing strong legal frameworks and integrated child and social protection system that protects the rights of migrant children in compliance with the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But many challenges remain. Undocumented and unaccompanied children lack access to child protection services, to an age and gender-sensitive protection determination process, to legal representation, to accessible information about their rights and avenues of redress. Ladies and gentlemen, detaining migrant children is never in their best interest. It is a form of violence and a violation of children's rights. Less than 8 years remain to achieve the 2030 Agenda. If we want to keep the promise of the SDGs to end all forms of violence against children, we can and must end child immigration detention. Peer learning is especially important. The wealth of experience from states that have ended child immigration detention can inform and inspire other states to take stronger action. To reach that goal, we need a wide mobilization. Member states and other key stakeholders at local, national, regional, and global levels must share their experiences. All action to support the rights of migrant children must be informed by children's views and experience and build on children's effective participation. We have to keep in mind that children on the move are first and foremost children, and their rights move with them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being a strong and providing us with a strong reminder that children's rights do not end at borders and that they take them with them, and that it is very much a question of, are we offering them the right choices and the right protection at the right moments where they need them, which is our obligation as governments, as states, as stakeholders. I am now particularly pleased, and apologies, Jacopo, for squeezing the time for you. With UNHCR, we have been on a journey together as co-leads with IDC, UNICEF, UNHCR on the working group on alternatives to detention. And it is now that I pass to you for our closing words. Giacomo Giorgi, you are the Senior Legal Officer and Head of the Asylum and Migration Unit in UNHCR. You're joining us from Geneva, and I'm giving you the floor to close us out and capture what are the key lessons that we can take from today's discussion, and what are really also some of the key actions that we would need to take forward together. Giacomo, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Verena, and thanks also to all the distinguished guests, the colleagues, and all the participants. I can say that while being here in Geneva, I can say that I can sort of feel the vibe, the strength that transpires from this discussion, and the various different inputs that have been provided have been extremely enriching. Maybe I should start actually by thanking, first of all, the governments of Thailand, of Colombia and Portugal, as well as, of course, the colleagues from UNICEF and from IDC that have accompanied us through this journey, and also for being really the sponsor of an initiative that I would say, in a way, represent in itself another testimony of the fact that peer learning represents an extreme added value when it comes to building bridges towards this whole goal that we are trying to pursue, which is basically promoting alternatives to detention, in particular towards ending immigration detention. This is a topic that is of extreme interest to UNHCR, as immigration detention equally affects migrants and refugees, and UNHCR's commitment to end this practice was clearly reiterated in a number of different situations, occasions, and it's framed actually in the UNHCR's position regarding the detention of refugee and migrant children in the migration context, which indeed reiterates a point that has been conveyed at several points during the course of this meeting, which is that basically child detention is never in the best interest of the child and should thus be eliminated. And I'm really citing here the UNHCR's position. Through our engagement at the Migration Network, in particular at Working Group 2 on Alternatives to Detention, we've had the chance to appreciate also the progress that's been attained on alternatives to detention towards ending child detention since the adoption of the Global Compact by a number of states and other stakeholders, as this was again discussed today, including through the temporary regularization schemes that have been adopted by Colombia and by Portugal, and through the MOU that our colleague from Thailand actually presented on the responsibilities that government agencies should have on the basis of this new agreement on non-detention of migrant children. I would like perhaps just to maybe go back briefly to the second report of the Secretary General on the GCM implementation, which has considered encouraging the steps that have been taken by states so far, which have in a way accelerated the use of alternatives to immigration detention in the context of the COVID-19 response. And I think that in this respect, it would be important to again emphasize the wide range of pledges that have been put forward in relation to Objective 13. If I'm not mistaken, we're talking about so far 35 pledges, not the least the one that we've heard about today from Thailand. And in addition to that, I think that we should also commend the role that other entities at state level, and I'm referring to national and regional courts as well, have been playing in this respect. Just a recent testimony has been provided by an orientation that has been taken by the European Court of Human Rights that established in a clear manner that administrative detention pending removal of children is also in contravention with international standards. maybe again, referring to the report of the Secretary General, I would also need, unfortunately, to emphasize that are still worrying trends. These are the words again of the Secretary General, with states sometimes resorting to detention for longer periods. This was especially in the context of the response to the pandemic, using public health concerns to justify detention or unlawful deportation. And maybe to close, I would say that to reverse these trends, we should probably learn from past experiences and build on the ones that have been actually so well documented by the network and by IDC, as we've heard today through their latest report, that have emerged from different sides of the globe. And we've heard about some of these practices today. More practices have come to the fore from Mexico, from Zambia, and many others. And just to really give you my final words here, I believe that in essence, what we may want to do is to, again, embrace the call by the Secretary General to take further steps to make what I think would be probably the happiest memory of our childhood, just to go back to what Verena was saying at the very beginning, which is to make liberty the norm. These were actually the words that were expressed by the Secretary General. And that will definitely take us towards, or hopefully will take us towards ending this obnoxious practice. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you, Jacopo. And thank you for closing us off so nicely, that it is preserving childhoods, which is why we're here. And it is mitigating harm and mitigating risks. And Hayat, thank you so much for staying on. It must be way past midnight for you now. We really appreciate it. You definitely earned the medal in longevity, endurance, and resilience. And not only for the work you do and the advocacy that you do today, but also for being with us. I would like to thank all the guests who have joined us online. I would like to thank our co-hosts and speakers from Colombia, from Portugal, from Thailand, from IDC. I would like to really thank you, Haya, who has joined from Australia, Jacopo, who's connected from Geneva, the SRSG on Violence Against Children, who has shared her voices and experiences. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. If there's one thing that you can take forward, it is mobilize the political commitment. Help us rethink, help us reimagine migration management without detention. Let's create a world where it is no longer a practice that is acceptable, that is considered legitimate. Let us multiply the number of countries who, like Colombia or Portugal or like Thailand, are phasing it out, so that down the road in a few years from now, we will have 190 speakers co-hosting an event on child immigration detention, reporting back on how it was done and how this awful practice no longer exists in the world today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining, and stay tuned for more.